and I see that we're under 20%. And I just need to ask you what that measures, because I'm so shocked. We have such a strong IT center, health tech center, higher ed technology in my district, that I'm just surprised. So what does this mean exactly?
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Senator Nelson. This map and this data measures households that have availability, broadband availability at the state statutory speed goal of 10 megabits download speed by, we measure at 6 megabits. The state statutory speed goal is 10 by 5, but because of FCC speed tiers, our measures are at 10 by 6. And so there very well may be IT and business facilities and healthcare facilities that have that higher, even higher speeds, but in terms of the population and the residences there, they, according to our data, when we last collected it last fall, that percentage fell below, I believe you said 20%.
Senator Nelson.
So having speeds above the state goal would be sufficient, but you're saying the number of households with speeds below the state goal of 10 up and 6 down.
Correct. That's what this map shows. And statewide, as we indicate, and I'll show a little bit more about that near the end, we're at 61.57% across Minnesota that have access to broadband at the state statutory speed goal.
Thank you.
So Mr. Hoffman, according to your map, then we're all kind of creatures that have it. Each center kind of looks at the area of the state they represent. On this map, yellow would be a lower rate, and as you move to the darker colors, they would have more coverage or more people under the state's goal.
Chair Sparks, that is exactly correct. So just another example, and again, hopefully you all saw the maps that I sent you for your own districts, but this is a county example of a map that shows, in this case, the type of broadband available. So fiber would be orangey, cable is the darker pink, if you will, DSL, and fixed wireless, etc. So at the county level, we have all those maps available on our website, as well as many more. So if you take a look at that, or your staff takes a look at it, and you have any questions, just don't hesitate to give me a call. I mentioned the survey and research we conduct, and the residential and business survey that we do annually. I'd just like to share a couple highlights, and actually you're going to get the first view of the results of our 2012 residential survey that measures broadband adoption and use. So we're going to release this later in February, but I wanted to share the most recent update with you here today. So according to our latest survey results, in 2012, Minnesotans are at a 78% rate of adoption in terms of subscribing to home broadband service. Importantly, in our two previous surveys, that number was 72%. So we've seen from our 2011 survey, our 2010 survey, to the 2012 survey, a 6% increase in subscriptions to home broadband service. That's a good trend, obviously, rather than staying stagnant. So I think that probably reflects a lot of good work in the nonprofit, the state, the public sector, the provider sector. Further, we look at why people who don't adopt. And the most significant reason that people give when asked why they do not subscribe to home broadband service is relevance. In other words, there's nothing online that I want to do or that I want to see, which is interesting. It is by far the largest reason, and that's consistent over time with our previous surveys. So that still is staying in place as the largest reason for folks not adopting home broadband service. Now here's, in our survey, we try to delve a little deeper and look at different demographic groups. And again, these are the results of our 2012 survey that will be more fully released in February. But you can see a comparison between the statewide numbers on the far left and then a number of different segments that we looked at on the right-hand side of the screen. Obviously, there's some important and interesting information there, I think, as we move forward, and Chair Kelleher will talk about the work of the task force. But when you look at mobile use, which is referenced in each group by the far right number, so in the over 65 and older, for example, we see 14%, and then so forth in the other three, we see how that number in certain segments is higher than others, and we also see how rural residents, for example, have an adoption rate about 7% below the state average, and seniors have a much greater drop-off in terms of adoption when we looked at it, and that's consistent with our results in prior years as well. And so I know Dr. Geller will be up later and talk a little bit about his findings related to both, I believe, rural and mobile use, so he can delve a little bit deeper. But we will also be delving a little bit deeper as we release this later in February. We also like to look, and last year we released something right before Christmas about satisfaction, because that's always a big question. We occasionally see articles written about people not happy with their service, and we wanted to get a little bit of a flavor about how Minnesotans feel about their home broadband service. And when we looked at it, according to our results, for the most part, we had pretty high satisfaction rates across all those segments. Obviously, the only one below 50% that we measured was in price, but you know, you could ask people how much they pay for apples at the store, and most would probably say they wish they were cheaper. So, but in terms of reliability and speeds and customer service, we were pleased to see that in Minnesota, those numbers are significantly higher than 50%. So that also is included in the kind of research that we do and then release to the state as well as all of Minnesota throughout the year. We also looked and do look annually at business adoption and use. And this is a little bit from our 2011 survey. We are in the process of conducting a survey right now that will be released later in the summer on business adoption and use of broadband. And I won't go into all these categories, and there's much more on our website. But you can see the kind of data we do gather and report on, segments, the different types of businesses that have and use broadband and subscribe, both by specific business type as well as employee levels. And we also look at, and it's on our website, the impact on revenue, businesses that subscribe to broadband versus those that don't in the same bucket of business type. And so you can really see the impact of broadband on the business sector of the Minnesota economy. And now we're getting to wrap up here. I mentioned our state speed goal and the number 61.57% according to our last measurement. Here you can see, since we've been measuring availability at the state speed goal, where the trend has gone and at what pace. It's about a little over a 5% increase since we started measuring this in April of 2011. And then these final two charts I think are interesting because there is a question that the task force deals with, as well as comes up all the time more and more, the impact of mobile and cellular broadband. This graph shows the availability across Minnesota at this wide variety of speed tiers, including mobile broadband. And if you look at the far right, the percent of households by speed tiers, you obviously see those numbers. And when you get to the state speed goal of 61.57 and below, in my next chart, you'll see those numbers stay static. But above that line, you'll see those numbers drop off. And I point that out because between the two, you'll be able to see the impact that mobile broadband is having on speed availability across Minnesota. So when you look at it there, you can see a drop off anywhere from 2% all the way up to 7%, and that's the impact already that we're seeing from mobile broadband and the continuing evolution of those technologies. So it's starting to make an impact, and we anticipate that it'll make even greater impact in the years ahead.
Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you might have got to the point that I've been thinking about since that map I asked you about last, where I just couldn't believe that Olmsted County is at 20%. But I'm reading the title, and it says that that particular map is terrestrial non-mobile broadband, which probably explains my dismay at this figure. But what I'd like to see is this particular same map that includes all broadband service, whether it's terrestrial or non-mobile or mobile, and why break it out? Why is it important to know the difference between non-mobile and mobile?
Mr. Hoffman.
Chair Sparks and Senator Nelson. In terms of the state speed goal of 10 by 5, mobile is not yet meeting that in terms of the combination of download and upload speeds. And so the impact on availability at the state speed goal is not felt yet by mobile broadband, although we anticipate that it will. But in our last measurement, it had not gotten there yet. So that's why that number and percentage would be where it is with no impact from mobile, because it's not hitting that speed goal yet.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, just to follow up then, I'm just curious about the speed goal as opposed to what exactly maybe businesses want, or I guess this is residential consumers want. Is it possible that they think that having, for some reason, mobile broadband is preferable to having maybe a higher speed at a non-mobile broadband, and why would the state be concerned about that?
Mr. Hoffman.
Chair Sparks, Senator Nelson. The consumer will out, right? And so some consumers might not want or need a 10 by 5 speed. But, and this was before my time, so I would defer to Chair Kelleher or somebody from the Department of Commerce. The state legislature, signed by then Governor Pawlenty, wanted to set a goal that was ambitious, recognizing that more and more economic activities and social activities were moving into an online arena, and that higher speeds were going to be necessary to be able to accomplish a lot of that, whether it's, and the task force is looking at all this, but everything from telehealth to medical records, to online education, etc., even for the average citizen, is eventually moving in that direction. And so to have that higher speed option, whether they want it or not, to have that option would be important for Minnesota economically and socially going forward, to be able to access and make use of the wide array of services that are moving in that direction. And we already see examples in the healthcare field where you need that kind of high speed to deal with x-rays or teleconferencing, for example, if you lived in a rural county and wanted to have a teleconference with a doctor in the Twin Cities or Mayo, where you would need that dynamic higher speed to be able to fully utilize that kind of opportunity.
Thank you. Senator Bonhoff.
Mr. Chair, and I guess just a follow-up to Senator Nelson's point, I guess it's hard to believe that Rochester doesn't have that speed, but that's another story. But the question that I was wanting to ask is about telephone service. I know many people are wrestling with, should they keep their landlines versus their cell phones and the connectivity around, just counting on this mobile device 24/7. Do you look at that in terms of statistics? Do you see a trend towards that? Is that part of your initiative? And is that of import to the state of Minnesota?
Mr. Hoffman.
Chair Sparks, Senator Bonoff, we look at the evolution of who's using a mobile device to access broadband, or access the internet, get online. We don't, and haven't looked at if people are getting rid of their landlines and using that as a sole communication device. Although, quite frankly, one of the things that we bring to the state, we have the flexibility, because we do this annually, to incorporate new questions. So the survey isn't static. So that's a very good idea, and we can work with you if you have specific questions you'd like us to ask in our 2013 survey, and the Department of Commerce to perhaps delve into questions that we haven't. So we'd be happy to do that.
Mr. Chair, that'd be great. I think people are at that point right now where they're deciding what makes sense from both a financial perspective but also a safety perspective. Can they just rely on a mobile device? What are the vulnerabilities of that reliance in the overall system? I know right now, if you're in a place where there's lots of cell phone activity, then you can sometimes not get, your service through. So things like that will be interesting going forward.
Senator Hurd.
Yes, Mr. Hoffman, I just want to get clarification on the word broadband. That includes satellite as well, right? So.
Mr. Hoffman.
Chair Sparks, Senator Hurd, we do not incorporate satellite into this because it is by its nature ubiquitous. So theoretically, everybody in Minnesota could get satellite service. There are some areas that couldn't for natural topography reasons, but ours is focused on fixed platforms, and then we do look at mobile as well. So we do not include satellite in this data.
Mr. Hoffman, thank you. I think this report is very helpful. Two questions. First of all, just on a general basis, how do you think we're doing as a state? And then second of all, I think, if I'm correct, your funding is potentially going out in 2014. Is there going to be a possibility of doing some? I don't want to steal any of the chair of the governor's task force on broadband, but for your actual organization, is there going to be some funding going forward to continue these efforts that you've done so far?
Chair Sparks, your first question, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was too focused on the second part.
Focus on the second part.
Yeah,
We'll come
yeah.
back to that.
Oh, the second part. Well, I think that remains to be seen. We are operating under a federal grant. The NTIA and the FCC have made it clear that they want these programs to continue. Whether or not the federal government will put the pieces in place to continue funding is uncertain. But we, as an organization and as a program, are looking at a combination of federal, state, and private sector opportunities to keep this going. When you look at the fact that the FCC is going to be making financial determinations on the Connect America funds based on data that's and mapping and availability information that needs to be collected at the state level, one would imagine that they will have to find a way to keep that information coming.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hoffman, I'd like to draw your attention to these maps that you walked us through, the map of Minnesota and also zooming in on the map of Freeborn County. And I'm just kind of curious, I think we have two different views here. One suggests that Freeborn County, less than 20% of residents, households have access to 10x6 service. And now if we zoom in here on Freeborn and we're looking at what defines broadband here, it's 768 kilobits per second downstream, 200 kilobits per second upstream. And I'm just curious, is there any level of detail that maybe gives us a better picture of what the actual service is in Freeborn in this zoomed in map? It's kind of a low threshold in my mind, and we don't really know what the true story is here. There's a big area in between these two maps that I think tells the true story of what's going on. And I think that's the kind of information that would be most useful for us as legislators, or most useful for us as we try to get a sense of what's available in our communities.
Mr. Hoffman?
Chair Sparks, Senator, on our website we do have a variety of county level maps, so there are more there are specific maps related to different speed tiers other than the basic broadband that you indicated. So there are enhancements and different views of what is available in the county. So that's there, but also if something is not there, we have the ability to create it. So if you were to look at your own county or the map I sent of your Senate district and wanted some additional information on a map, we more than likely can get that done. So we have that flexibility working to do that with you or with the Department of Commerce, and we've done that numerous times in our history, created specialty maps. So we can do that.
Okay, so you have that data, we don't have, Mr. Chair, Mr. Hoffman, you have that data, we don't have to extrapolate it by the service providers that are in that area. We can actually look at that threshold and get a better sense.
Mr. Hoffman?
Chair Sparks, Senator, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Any other questions of Mr. Hoffman? Thank you, those were good questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we'd like to call up the chair of the Governor's Task Force on Broadband.